People think your life falls apart slowly, like a dripping faucet. Mine collapsed in one night, in the kind of absurd tequila-fueled disaster you only see in movies and swear would never happen to you. Except it did. It all started with the bitter taste of failure on my tongue, and the need to drown it in alcohol. My name is Emily Carter, 27, a nobody waitress trying to keep rent paid and dreams alive in Los Angeles, the city that sells you hope at a premium and leaves you broke when you can't keep up. That night I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't even looking for trouble. I just wanted to forget. But trouble came anyway. 6 feet of sharp cheekbones, jet black hair pulled into a sleek bun, and the kind of piercing eyes that could cut you in half. Alexandra Hayes, CEO of a billion-dollar fashion empire. To the rest of the world, she was untouchable, cold, flawless, terrifying. To me that night she was just a stranger with lips that tasted like whiskey and a laugh so rare it felt like winning the lottery. We met at a rooftop bar, a place I normally couldn't even afford to breathe in. I'd gotten in through my roommate's friend, one of those networking mixers where broke people pretend to be important. I was nursing a cheap cocktail, already tipsy, when she slid into the seat across from me like she owned the world. Maybe she did. "You look bored," she said, voice smooth, low, dangerous. "I am bored," I shot back, too drunk to care who she was. "But you don't look like the type who saves drowning girls from boring parties." She smirked, tilting her glass. "Maybe I'm in the mood to save someone tonight." I should have known then that I was in over my head. But the thing about pain is, sometimes you mistake danger for comfort. And in her smile I found both. Hours blurred, shots, dancing, whispered secrets shouted over music, her hand steady on my waist when the floor tilted too much. Somewhere between the 5th drink and the twinkling skyline we kissed. God, it was reckless, messy, too much, and yet it felt like the first right thing I'd done in months. And then blackness. The next morning I woke up in silk sheets softer than sin, my head pounding, mouth dry, the smell of expensive perfume clinging to me. For a brief, foolish second, I thought I'd somehow stumbled into a dream. Then I turned my head and saw her, Alexandra, hair down, bare shoulders, sleeping next to me like some untouchable goddess who decided to slum it with mortals for a night. I panicked, obviously. My brain screamed, "Oh God, what did you do, Emily?" But panic turned to sheer terror when I saw the papers on the nightstand. Not just any papers. Marriage papers. With both our signatures. I swear I almost fainted. That was the beginning of the cruelest, strangest, most intoxicating chapter of my life. Because Alexandra Hayes didn't do accidents. She didn't do oops moments or messy nights she regretted. When she woke up and looked at me with those unreadable eyes, she didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch. She simply said, "Well, Mrs. Hayes, it looks like we've tied the knot." And just like that, my world turned upside down. The first few days were hell. She treated me like a contract, like I was some business deal she couldn't back out of. I hated her for it. I hated the arrogance in her walk, the way she made decisions for both of us without blinking, the fact that she didn't even ask me if I wanted this. But hate has a funny way of twisting into something else when you're forced to share air, meals, moments. There were glimpses of the woman beneath the armor. Late at night when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her pacing, talking softly on the phone about shareholders and betrayals. Once I caught her sitting in her office, head in her hands, shoulders shaking, crying, though she'd deny it to her last breath. And then there were the accidental touches. Her hand brushing mine as she passed me the wine. The way she lingered just a second too long when helping me into a car. Her eyes softening for a heartbeat before she snapped the mask back on. We fought constantly. About freedom, about money, about how none of this was real. I accused her of controlling me, of using me as some twisted PR stunt. She accused me of being naive, reckless, of not understanding the world she lived in. But under all the venom, there was a current pulling us together. Something neither of us wanted to admit. One night, after a particularly brutal fight, I slammed the door to the guest room she'd generously given me. She followed, of course, because Alexandra never let anything end without the last word. But instead of tearing into me again, she stopped. She just stood there, eyes searching mine like she was trying to solve a puzzle. And then she whispered, "Do you think I wanted this either? Do you think I wanted to wake up next to a stranger and call her my wife?" It was the first crack in her armor. And for the first time I saw her not as a CEO, not as the untouchable Alexandra Hayes, but as a woman just as lost as I was. That was the night everything began to change. Los Angeles is a city of facades. Glitter hides decay, smiles hide lies, love hides fear. And somehow, in the middle of its chaos, two broken women, one running from her failures, the other trapped by her power, collided. Our love wasn't gentle. It was brutal, fiery, terrifying. It tore us apart before it stitched us back together. But I'll tell you this. Waking up that morning, thinking I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, I never imagined that mistake would become the very thing that saved me. And as much as I tried to deny it, fight it, hate it, Alexandra Hayes was no longer just a drunken accident. She was becoming my home. If someone had told me that I'd end up living in a luxury penthouse with a woman who signed my name onto marriage papers after one drunken night, I'd have laughed in their face. Yet here I was, standing in the middle of Alexandra Hayes's immaculate living room, staring out at Los Angeles through floor-to-ceiling windows, wondering how the hell my life had twisted into this circus. I hated how much I noticed everything about her. The way her heels clicked like a metronome on marble floors. The crisp sound of papers sliding across her desk. Even the faint trace of her perfume, jasmine, and something darker that lingered on the elevator walls long after she'd left. It made me feel like a trespasser in a life too big, too cold, too perfect. Alexandra, of course, didn't flinch. She wore her control like a second skin. To her, I was a variable she'd decided to manage, nothing more. She had staff to run her empire, attorneys to fix problems, and now apparently me to parade around as the unexpected wife no one could question without risking their careers. The first week was suffocating. Every time she looked at me, I felt like she was measuring me against some invisible standard and finding me lacking. I was too messy, too emotional, too loud. She was the woman who conquered boardrooms. I was the girl who spilled coffee on my own apron during a double shift. One evening, after another exhausting day of being ignored in her sprawling apartment, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "This isn't living," I snapped when she finally walked through the door, dropping her designer bag on the counter like she owned not just the room but the whole damn world. Her eyes flicked to me, cool, assessing. "What exactly do you think this is, Emily? A prison? Your golden cage," I shot back. "You don't care about me. You don't even see me. I'm just convenient." Her jaw tightened. For a second I thought she'd dismiss me, brush me off like she did with her employees. But instead she stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "Do you think this is convenient for me? Do you think I wanted a wife chosen by vodka shots and bad decisions?" I froze. Something in her eyes cracked, the mask slipping for just a breath. Vulnerability flickered there, raw and unexpected, before she snapped it shut again. That was Alexandra. Always giving just enough to make you question if you'd imagined it. I turned away, my throat tight. Then why keep me here? Why not annul this and move on? Her silence was heavier than any words. When I finally looked back, she was standing by the window, arms crossed, staring down at the city as though it owed her answers. "Because," she said finally, "walking away from you feels like giving up. And I don't lose." It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. But it was the most honest thing she'd given me. And against my better judgment it hooked me. Days bled into nights, and the edges between us blurred. I began to see Alexandra in fragments the public never got. Like how she brewed her own coffee in the mornings instead of letting the housekeeper do it dark, no sugar, no cream. How she kicked off her heels the second she stepped through the door, as if they'd been shackles. How she fell asleep with a book half open on her chest, pretending she was too busy to read but secretly devouring stories like a starving woman. Once I stumbled into her office at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. She was sitting in the dark, laptop glowing against her face, scrolling through a slideshow of charity proposals. When she realized I was there, she shut it down instantly, her mask snapping back into place. But I'd already seen its softness in her eyes, the guilt she carried like a shadow. The more I learned, the more dangerous it became. Because underneath the control, the perfection, the razor-sharp wit, there was a woman who felt too much and showed too little. And I was falling for her. Our fights didn't stop. If anything, they became sharper, more personal. One night, I accused her of being incapable of love. Her lips tightened and she whispered almost to herself, "Love is for people who can afford to be weak." I hated her for that. But I hated myself more for wanting to prove her wrong. The turning point came during a charity gala. She insisted I come. Her wife couldn't exactly be absent without rumors spreading. I wore a borrowed dress, cheap compared to the glittering gowns around me, but Alexandra looked at me like I'd stepped off a runway. "You clean up well," she murmured, offering her arm. "Don't sound so surprised." I shot back, but my pulse raced when her fingers brushed mine. The night was a blur of champagne and flashing cameras. Alexandra was flawless, commanding every conversation, every glance. But when the speeches began, I noticed her hand tremble slightly as she held her glass. No one else saw it. Only me. I slipped my hand into hers under the table. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Later, as we left the gala, paparazzi swarmed, shouting questions, blinding us with flashes. Without thinking, Alexandra wrapped her arm around me, pulling me close, shielding me from the chaos. Her lips brushed my temple as she whispered, "Ignore them. Just breathe." In that moment, the world faded. There was only her warmth, her steadiness, her heartbeat against my shoulder. And for the first time since that drunken night, I wondered if fate had been less cruel than I thought. But love, if that's what it was, didn't come easily. The closer we grew, the harder Alexandra fought it. One night, after too much wine, I confronted her. "Why do you keep pushing me away? What are you so afraid of?" She looked at me, her eyes stormy, her voice a whisper edged with steel. "Because everyone I've ever loved has used it against me. And I won't let you be another wound I can't close." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull back this time. "Maybe I'm not here to wound you. Maybe I'm here to heal you." Her silence stretched. Then, so softly I almost missed it, she said, "I don't know how to be healed." Neither did I. But I wanted to try. And that was the cruel, beautiful truth about us. We were two broken women, stitched together by accident, fighting every instinct to tear apart, yet unable to let go. Los Angeles glittered outside, mocking us with its illusions of perfection. But inside that penthouse, amid all the sharp edges and fragile moments, something real was taking root. Something terrifying. Something unstoppable. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't even love at first fight. It was love in the quiet moments, the brush of her hand against mine, the vulnerability in her eyes when she thought no one noticed, the way she said my name like it meant more than she wanted to admit. And I was falling hard even if it meant crashing. Secrets don't stay buried in Los Angeles. They fester, leak, and eventually explode under the weight of too many whispered conversations and flashing cameras. And with Alexandra Hayes, secrets weren't just personal, they were weapons. I learned that the hard way. It happened one evening, weeks after the gala that had softened the edges between us. I just begun to think maybe, just maybe, had a chance. Alexandra had let me in little by little. A smile over breakfast. A kiss that wasn't just for show. A night where she fell asleep on the couch, her head on my lap, trusting me to hold her. But then the storm came. I found it by accident. A folder on her desk left open. Contracts spread out like a minefield. I shouldn't have looked, God knows I shouldn't, but curiosity has always been my downfall. And there it was. An agreement dated the morning after our drunken wedding night, detailing our marriage as a merger. Her signature. A lawyer's notes. A clause about protecting shareholder confidence. I felt sick. When she walked in, heels clicking against the marble floor. I was still standing there, the papers trembling in my hands. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Her face froze. Then slowly she closed the door, her mask sliding into place. "You weren't supposed to see that. You used me." My voice rose. "This whole time, every moment, every fight, every god, every kiss was just part of your plan to protect your damn company." Her eyes darkened. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me, Alexandra. Make it simple. Because right now, all I see is that you married me to save face. And I've been stupid enough to think there was something real here." The silence between us was brutal. For the first time, she didn't have the right words, the perfect excuse. She looked almost human. And it hurt worse than any cruelty she could have thrown at me. Finally, she whispered, "At first, yes. It was about the company. But it isn't anymore." I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But the betrayal burned too deep. I dropped the papers on her desk, shaking my head. "You don't get to say that. Not when you've been lying from the start." I stormed out before she could stop me, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. For 3 days I didn't speak to her. I stayed in the guest room, ignoring her attempts at conversation, dodging her gaze. She tried, in her own way, leaving breakfast outside my door, sending texts she'd never normally send. "We need to talk. I'm sorry. Please, Emily." But every time I saw her face, I saw the contract. And every time I saw the contract, I remembered how much I'd let myself fall. It was easier to be angry than broken. On the 4th night, I came home late from walking aimlessly through the city. Alexandra was in the kitchen, barefoot in silk pajamas, staring into a glass of wine like it held answers. She looked up when I entered, her eyes tired, stripped of their usual sharpness. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I dropped my bag on the counter. "Talk then. Tell me why I shouldn't pack my things and leave." She flinched just slightly. Then she set the glass down and met my gaze head-on. "Because I was afraid. And I did what I always do when I'm afraid. I controlled the situation. I married you to keep the sharks from circling. But I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to care." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "You can't build love on lies, Alexandra." Her voice cracked just barely. "I don't know how to love without lies." That broke me. Because for the first time, I saw her not as the cold CEO. Not even as the flawed woman I'd glimpsed in the quiet nights, but as someone terrified of being left behind. And despite the anger, despite the betrayal, I couldn't walk away. Not yet. But forgiveness wasn't simple. The more I tried to move past it, the more the world pressed in. The tabloids smelled blood. Rumors swirled about our marriage, some claiming it was fake, others that Alexandra had bought me to cover up scandals. Paparazzi camped outside the building, shouting questions that made my skin crawl. And then came the dinner with her board of directors. She Esquedno insisted I come. "They need to see us united," she said, her tone brooking no argument. I almost refused. But some stubborn part of me wanted to prove I wasn't just a pawn. So I put on the best dress I had, let her stylist pin up my hair, and walked into that sleek restaurant on her arm like I belonged there. The board members were sharks in suits, circling, their smiles too sharp, their compliments too calculated. One of them, a man old enough to be my father, leaned in and murmured, "So you're the girl who trapped Alexandra. Must have been one hell of a night." My cheeks burned. I wanted to slap him. But before I could speak, Alexandra's hand tightened around mine under the table. Her voice was ice. "Careful, Richard. That's my wife you're disrespecting." The table went silent. No one dared push further. In that moment I realized something. Alexandra might have used me at first, but she was no longer pretending. When she called me her wife, she meant it. That night, when we got home, I confronted her again. But this time it wasn't anger in my voice. "Why did you defend me like that?" She looked at me, almost incredulous. "Because you're mine. And I'll be damned if I let anyone treat you otherwise." Her words set fire to something inside me. Dangerous, intoxicating, unstoppable. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "Then prove it. Prove to me that this isn't just about control. That I'm not just a line on a contract." Her hands trembled when they cupped my face, her eyes raw in a way I'd never seen. "I don't know how to love, Emily. But I want to learn. With you." And when her lips crashed against mine, it wasn't business, it wasn't strategy, it wasn't even apology. It was desperation. Need. Truth. For the first time, Alexandra Hayes kissed me like a woman stripped of power, stripped of fear, stripped of everything except the want burning between us. And I kissed her back like I was willing to risk the pain all over again. Love didn't solve everything. We still fought, still stumbled, still struggled to trust. But that night marked a shift. We weren't two strangers bound by drunken choices anymore. We were something else, fragile, furious, frighteningly real. The world still tried to tear us apart. The tabloids called me a gold digger. Her investors questioned her judgment. My old friends from the diner whispered behind my back. But for the first time, Alexandra stood not in front of me, not behind me, but beside me. And maybe, just maybe, that was what love was supposed to be. Happiness, I'd learned, doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It sneaks in quietly on the heels of storms, when you're too exhausted to fight anymore and too raw to pretend. With Alexandra and me, happiness wasn't a given, it was a choice. One we stumbled into, scarred and trembling, but unwilling to let go. After the night of our first real kiss, the world tested us harder than ever. The tabloids escalated, publishing lies about affairs, betrayals, and secret contracts. Strangers shouted at me on the street, calling me a gold digger, a fraud, a nobody clinging to a queen. And in boardrooms across Los Angeles, Alexandra's name was dragged through the mud for letting a waitress into her empire. But something had changed. Instead of shutting me out, Alexandra began pulling me closer. She started talking, really talking, about the pressure she'd grown up with, the parents who valued her company more than her childhood, the betrayals that taught her to trust no one. She confessed she'd been terrified the morning she woke up next to Medhat. Marrying me had been both her worst mistake and her only salvation. And for the first time I saw her not as the untouchable CEO, but as a woman who had never truly been held for who she was, only for what she could offer. I made her a promise that night, whispered against her skin as we lay tangled in sheets. You don't have to earn my love, Alexandra. You just have to accept it. Her eyes glistened, and she kissed me like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. But love isn't tested in soft moments. It's tested in fire. The fire came in the form of an exposé. Someone leaked the contract, the one outlining our marriage as a merger. Overnight, headlines screamed that Alexandra's marriage was a sham, a business move, a scandal. My face was plastered across every screen, branded as the woman who conned her way into luxury. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to pack my bags and vanish back into anonymity, let her rebuild her empire without the weight of me dragging her down. But when I told her that, she snapped. You think I built all of this just to watch it fall apart because of cowards with pens? She demanded, pacing our living room like a storm in heels. You think I'd let them take you from me? I stared at her, stunned. Alexandra, this could ruin you. She stopped, her chest rising and falling, eyes blazing. Then let it. I'd rather lose everything than lose you. It was the first time she'd said it outright. Not in half gestures, not in veiled looks, but in words so raw they shook me to my core. I crossed the room, took her trembling hands in mine and whispered, then let's fight. Together. The next weeks were brutal. We faced cameras, lawsuits, investors demanding answers. Alexandra, who had always ruled her world with ice and precision, stood beside me in press conferences and said the words no one expected. Yes, our marriage began as a mistake, but it became the best mistake of my life. I love her. The world gasped. Some laughed. Others sneered. But I saw the truth in her eyes, and for once, I didn't care what anyone else believed. Because it was real. For us it was real. One night, after surviving another grueling day, we escaped to the rooftop of her building. The city stretched out below, glittering and loud, but up there it felt like we were the only two people alive. She leaned against the railing, her hair down, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen. Do you ever wonder how different things would be if we hadn't met that night? I laughed, shaking my head. I'd probably still be slinging coffee at the diner, dreaming about a life I'd never touch. And I'd still be alone, she admitted, her voice breaking. I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around her from behind, pressing my cheek against her back. Then thank God for tequila. She chuckled, the sound low and genuine. Then she turned in my arms, cupping my face with both hands. Emily, I don't know how to do this perfectly, but I know I can't imagine doing it without you. Tears stung my eyes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here. And under the fading stars, with dawn bleeding into the horizon, she kissed me like a vow. Months later, the storm had quieted. The tabloids found new scandals to chase. The board begrudgingly accepted our marriage, and the world moved on. But inside our home, everything had changed. We still fought, of course. Alexandra was stubborn as hell, and I was too fiery to back down. But now our fights ended in laughter, in apologies, in kisses that tasted of relief instead of regret. She took me to the diner once, sliding into a booth like she'd never sat in one before. My old coworkers stared like they were seeing a ghost. Alexandra, dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, leaned across the table and kissed me right there, in front of everyone. This is where you came from, she said softly, and I'm proud to be part of it. I cried into my fries, and she held me until the world blurred. Love didn't turn Alexandra into someone else. She was still fierce, still guarded, Still ruthless when the world demanded it. But with me she was something more. She was vulnerable. She was kind. She was mine. And I was hers not because of a drunken night, not because of a contract, not because of the chaos that followed, but because somewhere in the wreckage we chose each other. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that morning I woke up in silk sheets with a hangover and a ring on my finger. I remember the panic, the disbelief, the certainty that I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And then I look at Alexandra beside me, her breathing steady in sleep, her hand curled around mine, and I realize something simple, something profound. That mistake was the beginning of everything. And if I had the choice, I'd make it again. Every single time. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.